Hey, Christian, how can we get Christians to fight less, to have less conflict in their churches and their marriages? How can you do that in your church and in your marriage? Well, I want to give you 5 things that you can do that will reduce conflict. And hopefully you can share this video with other Christians so that we can all do this better. Because I reckon these 5 things would reduce heaps of conflict among Christians. Not everything, but reduce a fair chunk. Okay, here's the 5 things. Number 1, we triage. We've got to work out what the stakes are on any issue, right? When I go to the hospital for anything, they triage me. They go, yeah, this is serious, this is not that serious. That's what we've got to do whenever there's a conflict, whenever there's an issue. Is this a gospel issue, a salvation issue? Yeah, that's high stakes, you know. Did Jesus rise from the dead? Well, that's a salvation issue. That's a gospel issue. That's really important. That's a bigger stakes thing. But other things like, Arminianism and Calvinism. And I'm, very happy to call myself a Calvinist. I think it's a great way of reading the Bible. I think it safeguards grace. I think it's healthier for your Christian life. But you know what? I don't want to have the same pressure in that discussion as I do in a salvation gospel issue discussion. It takes the heat out of it if we can triage things. So there's health issues like that one. And then there's irrelevant issues, things that are the Bible's silent on, that are more personal preference of just how we do things, our different styles and stuff like that. That there shouldn't be that much pressure in it. That should not be high stakes. Too often people are dividing over things because we haven't triaged well. There's too much conflict because we put too much pressure on things because we're not triaging. So triage, important thing to do. Secondly, empathize. We want to understand each other. We want to genuinely listen to each other. We want to show that spirit of curiosity to try and understand the position of someone else. If we can do that, that's being humble, that's being teachable. It's a great godly thing to do. We don't want to just be preparing our arguments in our head as someone is telling us their position. That's assuming things. No, we want to listen carefully. We want to be able to mirror it back to them and say their position, maybe even better than they can say it themselves. We want to understand other people that well. So we've got to empathize, and with that, we want to validate their feelings and acknowledge good points they made. That's a healthy, wise, good, godly thing to do. So let's empathize. Next, we want to tolerate. We want to sit with our difficult, yucky emotions. Because so often things can get heated, we can get worked up because we don't do what Proverbs tells us to do. And I've made another video about this, in that you got to regulate your emotions. You got to calm down your inner world. When someone's critiquing you, when someone's saying something that offends you or really, makes you feel yuck, we've got to be able to sit with that and tolerate that. Not just jump to fixing it or arguing it or hiding from it or ignoring it, dismissing it, being defensive. No, we've got to learn to sit with it. That's really important, that we can sit with those hard, yucky emotions. Emotional regulation, very important for solving conflict and for godliness. Okay, so we've got to triage, we've got to empathize, we've got to tolerate our yucky emotions, and then we've got to reframe. That's what Paul does in Philippians 4. You remember you got Euodia and Syntyche, and they're having a big argy-bargy. We don't know about what, but it's very serious. Serious enough that he writes to them and publicly tells them to stop arguing and to unite around Jesus. But he reframes it. He gets them to remember that they have more in common than they do that divides them. He reminds them that they're both of them have their names in the book of life. He encourages them to pray, to commit it to God. I mean, what the ultimate reframe, isn't it? I hand these things over to God and I go, I can trust that God is working out his good plan, that he's a good God who loves me. He sent his son to die for me. It gives me great peace when I hand things over to God. So, and part of that is as well is that he tells them to be thankful. So, as soon as you've got that attitude of gratitude, it's going to change the way you see the world and change the way you think. So reframing. And he then says, think on such things. You remember those verses? where he's getting them to think about the good things and to focus on that. It's so easy to focus on the negatives, focus on what divides us, focus on lots of unhelpful things. Sometimes we just need to reframe, to take the heat out of the situation, to see the positives. Those sort of things can be very, very helpful. And we've got the ultimate reframing tool in the gospel. And then finally, last thing, and probably the most important, is that we need to go to Scripture. As Christians, we go, God is the ultimate authority. He's the one who has spoken to us in the Bible. That's where we hear God's voice. And so we can go to the Bible and we can look at what Scripture says and we can find out what the truth is. It gives us a place that we can go and talk these things through. It gives us common ground. It gives us an authority that will make decisions on stuff. Now, look, I get it. Sometimes there is conflict because we interpret the Bible differently and because we might not agree on what the Bible's saying. But at least if we can come to the Bible and humbly, prayerfully try to listen to what it's saying on its terms, then we can solve so many conflicts, can't we? But it means we have to know our Bibles well, and it means we have to submit to what it's saying even when we don't like it. And we have to learn some good tools on how to read them so that we, as little as possible, misunderstand what it's saying. Okay, so there's the things that I reckon would reduce conflict massively. We've got to triage. We've got to empathize. We've got to tolerate yucky emotions. We've got to reframe things when we're seeing it one way. We've got to, look at it through the lens of the gospel, see who God is again, and see it differently. Be thankful for the person we're having conflict with. And then finally, we go to the Scriptures, knowing that God's spoken to us and He's the ultimate authority. He's the decider. And if we do those 5 things, man, oh man, I reckon our marriages, our churches, our friendships, so many things would be so much better. So do you think you can do those 5 things? Give them a go. Pray about them, think about them, and again, share this with someone, share this with another Christian, because if every Christian was doing these things, I think it would just be so much better for God's people. Thanks.